Greetings. My name is Reverend Martin Quick, and I want to thank you for joining our Thriving Through the Holidays. We want to encourage you to share this broadcast because you never know who may be struggling during this time. We also want you to know that we are available here if you need some help with your grief. If it's not you, then maybe a friend or maybe even a relative needs help, and you can provide this resource for them. After the video, then we'll meet the following Tuesday at 6:30 on Zoom to discuss and share what we've learned and give you some practical tools to help you thrive through the holiday. Remember, you don't have to grieve alone. Be sure to take notes, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 6:30 on our Zoom. Now, here's a special presentation from our Grief Share Ministry.
Welcome to our Tuesday Table Talk, sponsored by the Grief Support Ministry of the Journey United Methodist Church, Columbia, South Carolina, the Dr. George A. Ashford Senior Pastor. I'm Reverend Mary Johnson, your host for the November 2021 edition, and our theme is Thriving Through the Holidays. The holidays can be difficult for those persons who are experiencing a loss. That loss may be in the form of a loved one, a divorce, or other relationships, the loss of a job, the loss of your health, etc. Your loss may be recent, or it may be several years ago, because we know the holidays will trigger certain emotions related to loss, but be it recent or one that occurred several years ago. Here at Journey Church, we don't want you to merely survive the holidays. We want you to thrive through the holidays. We're not here to try to fix you. We're here to encourage you, to offer you hope, and share practical strategies so that you can thrive through the holidays. Our guests for this edition of Tuesday Table Talk are active members of the Grief Support Ministry here at Journey Church. And while they're committed to providing support for others who are grieving, they themselves are not immune to the pain and the challenges of grieving through the holidays. They will share some of their stories in hope that the best practices that they have endured will help you and your families thrive through the holidays. Let's meet the guests for our first half of today's segment of Tuesday Table Talk at Journey Church. With us for this first segment, we have three distinguished lay servants. First, we have Sylvia Harris Green. Sylvia is a native of Newport News, Virginia. She earned a BS degree from Belhaven College, Jackson, Mississippi, and a master's degree from the National Graduate School of Quality Management. She retired from the military after 24 years of active duty. Sylvia and her late husband, Linwood, had 3 biological children, but raised 12. Welcome, Sylvia Harris Green. Next, we have Teresa Jacobs Montgomery. Teresa was born and reared in Columbia, South Carolina, but spent much of her time in Greenwood County, South Carolina. She earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in social work from Benedict College. She retired from the state of South Carolina after 39 years. She's married to Richard, and they have 2 daughters, 3 grands, and 1 great-grand. Welcome, Teresa Jacobs Montgomery. And we also have Sheila Griffin Pendavas. Sheila was born in Newark, New Jersey. She spent her formative years in Detroit, Michigan, and moved to South Carolina to attend high school. She earned her psychology degree from South Carolina State University and worked for the federal government for 38 years. Sheila is married to David, and they have one son. Welcome, Sheila Pendavas. Thank you, ladies, for being here with us on this edition of Tuesday Table Talk at Journey Church. Would each of you just tell us what your situation of grief is?
I'm Sylvia, and my situation of grief is I lost my son in 2019 and my husband the next year, which was devastating.
Hi, my name is Teresa. Just this year, one of my best friends passed away. My last maternal uncle passed away, and a great niece was tragically killed. Just this past week, we lost our other mother, commonly known as our stepmother.
Hi, I'm Sheila Pendavas, and I have lost two close cousins within the past year and a half. And I also had other friends and distant cousins, particularly with COVID, and it's all been hard.
Thank you. Sylvia, I understand that you've experienced, as you just shared with us, two very significant losses over the past 2 years, your son and your husband. And I can't even imagine the effect that this has had on you physically, emotionally, and spiritually during your everyday experience. But the holidays must have been especially challenging. And having raised 12 children, it's no doubt that you are the matriarch of your family. So tell us how this role has affected you during the past 2 holiday seasons.
During the past 2 holiday seasons, it's like I felt like a zombie. All I wanted was for the holidays to come and the holidays to go. I really had no feeling of happiness. When I would buy gifts, I would just buy anything just so someone would have a gift, but love and the affection that I have for my family wasn't really put in it. And I just didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to have something for them, so I was picking anything. Also, I had to cook. I didn't want to cook, but I had to cook because everybody was going to come to the house. So it was just a trying situation.
Well, Sylvia, how did it make you feel when other people put those unrealistic expectations on you?
I felt like I was obligated because I was the matriarch of the family. I tried to act happy because I didn't want anybody to be sad, especially being sad for me or because of me. And I just played the role. Sometimes when people would talk to me, I just wanted to scream, but I had to hold it in, and I would just smile.
So what about this year? Is there anything different you're going to do, especially for Sylvia?
This year, I do plan on doing something different. I know Thanksgiving, the family will be at my house, so I will cook and do the things I'm supposed to do, but I'm going to do it as a group. I'm going to have everybody participating, my niece and my daughter, so I won't take on the whole challenge. And then I'm going to try to get away by myself. Sometimes I just feel like I need to get away, even if it's just to go downtown and stay in a hotel and be by myself, just to get some peace of mind.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. It is so important for you to be able to take some time for yourself. Now, Teresa and Sheila, in addition to grieving your personal losses in your own lives, both of you, I know, have worked alongside other people in the ministry here at Journey, but also in your family. So would you share with us some jewels? Give us some jewels. Give us some things that our listening audience can do to help them to be able to not just survive, but thrive through the holidays.
Well, one of the things that I would suggest is that you don't push yourself too much. You might be surprised how comforting and meaningful quiet, alone time can be. So give yourself some space and space from others too. Try new and fun recipes, but don't let it become a dreaded task. One of the things that we really enjoy in my family is getting in the kitchen together, especially the young ones, when you're trying to show them how to build new traditions, and taking them in the kitchen with you and showing them how to bake cookies and bake cakes. We take pictures of what we're doing in the kitchen so we can look at them in later years. And, you know, so we're just building, celebrating old traditions, but building new ones as well.
Okay. And I would say that make a holiday plan that is specific for you and your family, that's specific to your grieving experience. And also have a backup plan, because it's okay to change your mind. Don't get caught up in what other families are doing. Do what works for you and your family, and also that it's important to talk about it beforehand. Maybe even during the summer, start talking about what are we going to do for Thanksgiving, what are we going to do for Christmas, and that type of thing. After COVID, maybe volunteer at homeless shelters or soup kitchens. You can honor your deceased loved ones, even without using words. Someone may want to go and plant a tree or something like that maybe your loved one enjoyed. Like maybe your grandmother enjoyed hydrangeas, so someone may want to plant a hydrangea so that way whenever it blooms, it's a reminder. Visit the burial site and place a special Christmas flower plant. And remember that it's okay if you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. It's okay if the other family member does not want to participate. Don't feel guilty, and don't make others feel guilty either. And as was mentioned earlier, create new family traditions. For example, you may want to travel during the holidays. I know for my family, a few years ago, we did Thanksgiving at the beach. And this year, we're going to do Thanksgiving. The adult nieces and nephews are going to plan the Thanksgiving meal. And this was actually suggested by my mother. My mother's 84 years old, and she suggested that, and I think it's a wonderful idea because it helps them to start building traditions before that person leaves this earth. And so that's something too. And then simplify and organize, remove items that maybe that your loved one had that you no longer need. Someone else can benefit from that. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. You can even take pictures of memories. Instead of holding on to that item, you can take a picture of that item, and you will have that forever. So.
Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to add, Teresa?
I'd like to say that bonding with others who are grieving during the holidays is a great idea. Visiting a nursing home or an assisted living facility, because many of the residents do not have family or don't have family members who visit. My niece, who lives in Baltimore, lost her mother last week, and we had the celebration of life for her. And while she was here, she asked me if I'd host Thanksgiving dinner, which I was probably going to do anyway. But one of the things that we've done in years past is everybody gets together and contributes something so it won't be overwhelming for just one person. But she wanted to do this, and I know that she's struggling, and I don't mind because we can all be there for her. This has been very difficult for her.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Sylvia?
Yes. I think that when you're going through your grief, don't take on any unrealistic projects. I know you want to do it, but don't take it on if you don't really feel like it and you're only doing it trying to please someone else. Also, don't get upset when you see that people don't realize that you're hurting. Like in my case, I was trying to project that I wasn't hurting, and when people thought I was okay, afterward I would get upset because I'm like, they think I'm okay, but I feel like screaming inside. So don't take that upon yourself. And don't act like nothing bothers you. share. If something's bothering you, share. Don't try to hold it in.
Thank you, ladies. And I know that sometimes for you all, and also for those of you who are listening, it may seem like your holidays will never be the same again without your loved one, but over time, you'll learn to be able to thrive through the holidays again. I also want to add with something that you can do is to have an accountability partner, someone that you trust and someone that's not so thin-skinned, in a matter of speaking, that will be able to take when you push back on them, but somebody that will make sure you don't overdo it, but also that person will be able to make sure you don't just retreat and not get involved in anything. Grief has a unique way of giving us permission to evaluate what parts of the holidays we enjoy and what parts we don't. So remember, there's no right or wrong to handle the holidays while you're grieving. Friends and family members may not have a clue as how to help you through this time, and you may not either. It's natural to feel that you might never enjoy this time, but over time, you will come to be able to lift up your loved ones in unique ways and to enjoy the holidays. Thank you, ladies, so much for being with us on this edition of Tuesday Table Talk at Journey Church.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Now let's meet the guests for the second half of today's episode of Tuesday Table Talk at Journey Church, Columbia, South Carolina. With us, we have 3 additional awesome leaders in the church and the community. First, we have Reverend Dr. Martin Quick. Reverend Quick was born in New York, reared in Wallace, South Carolina. He earned his BS degree in business management from Morris College, Sumter, South Carolina, his Master of Divinity from Lutheran Theological Seminary, and his Doctor of Ministry from Hood Theological Seminary. Dr. Quick is the Associate Pastor at Journey United Methodist Church in Columbia, South Carolina, and he's also published a book titled Evangelism. Join me in welcoming Reverend Dr. Martin Luther Quick. And we have his lovely wife, Kimberly Love Quick. Kimberly is a native of South Carolina. She earned her BA degree in English from Clemson University. She's employed with Coforce, an IT organization. And Kim is also the board chair of the Killingsworth Home, which is a unique community residence for women who are emerging from crisis situation. The Quicks have been married for 23 years and have 3 adult children. Join me in welcoming Kimberly Quick to Tuesday Table Talk. Nelda Canada is also with us. Nelda is originally from Kingstree, South Carolina, but grew up in New York. She earned a BA degree in history from City College in New York and her paralegal certificate from Adelphi University. She retired as a paralegal from McAnders, Goodluck, and Curry, LLC. Nelda and her husband Daniel moved to South Carolina in the mid-1980s. They have been married for 42 years and have 4 adult children, 4 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren. Join me in welcoming Nelda Canada to Tuesday Table Talk at Journey Church. Thank you all again for being here. Now, would each of you tell us what your situation of grief is?
In 2019, I lost my mom. Her name was Hildania McClary Thomas. She lived with me for the last 2 years of her life, but I was her only daughter. She only had 2 children, and we were very, very close. You can imagine what it meant to me to lose my mom.
In 2016, I lost my father, who had battled multiple myeloma for 6 years. So I had anticipatory grief where every day we woke up just not knowing if that was going to be the last day. And then whenever it finally happened, we were at peace because he did go through hospice. Throughout COVID, I've lost several family members. And with COVID, you just didn't have the opportunity to properly grieve. We had several funerals that I had to watch on TV and not be able to hug my friends and my family. And we also, buried people that were very close to us, and just not having that opportunity to say the final goodbyes was very hard to deal with.
My situation of grief would be, several, but I'll start with I think the one that was the most impactful in terms of grief was my brother, Darrell Quick. Died July 23rd, 2008, and he was killed by a drunk driver. I think the impact of just coming out of nowhere, when you'd spoken with somebody a couple days ago, and next thing you know that you get a phone call and they're gone. And I think out of anybody at that time, in terms of closeness, I think he's probably the closest person that I've ever lost that was near my age, other than my great-grandparents and some others. But that was a primary situation of grief for me.
Okay. Grieving is individual. And like I told the 3 lay shepherds that were here with us in the first half of this segment, I know that while you grieve, but you also, through your ministry and your involvement in the community, you also go alongside others when they're grieving. But what I would like for you to do for us on today is to share your story, because there are parts of your story that can be beneficial to other person who are grieving, especially through the holidays. So Nelda, as you said earlier, your mother was the matriarch of the family. And so would you share with us what it was like? You also said that your mother was with you and she was ill. So while sometimes we might anticipate losing a loved one, when it happens and it's just as devastating as if the person was not ill. So would you share your story with us surrounding your mother?
Reverend Mary, you said when it happens, and that is oh so true. You think that you are ready as you see changes, physical changes, mental changes, emotional changes. You talk about it, you think you've been trained, or you have been trained, but when it hits home and those eyes close, you're at stage 1. There's no training or no lessons for that, at least for me. When my mom died, coming up to the holidays, how should I say this? My mom was a matriarch, not just to our extended family. And the whole family looked at her as Mom, Aunt Donnie, as the matriarch. Mm-hmm. And she set a pattern. There was a pattern for lots of things, but certainly there was a pattern for the holidays. You started Thanksgiving with the traditional big meal and family gathering. Wherever you were around the world for our family, you're going to make it home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. You had the traditional meals. Now that, I don't know how they were able to prepare those meals, like they did, but these magical meals appeared. The first year when she did, I was determined that we were going to have, that pattern of the holidays was going to be carried out. It begins with Thanksgiving, no decorations until December. But once it's the beginning, first weekend in December, you can put your decorations up. And of course, Christmas, you buy lots of presents, do lots of shopping, the music comes on, and it's just celebration. You call people that you hadn't called in a long time. It's just the coming together of friends and family alike. Well, the first year that Mother passed away, you would get these calls that people that didn't know that she had passed away. So that's one thing that you had to do with. But being a big girl, having been at that time a lay shepherd, I was determined, as I said, things were not going to change. It was last year that I surprised myself at how devastated I was, how broken I was during the holidays. I think that I was more broken last year than I was the year before, the first Christmas that she passed away.
Right, and sometimes it takes a while, because that first year you could have been somewhat numb, and then we had COVID on top of that.
Exactly. So and last year with COVID, there was no opportunity to be with family. Like, even I had pretended in the cardboard state that I was the first year, and when I did have some family around for last year, there was none of that. It was hard, but I did having gone through, I hope I'm not being confusing, some real specific, how should I say, help from my grief share support group.
Okay.
That first year. We did some things that I think we'll talk about a little later that I did, but I did during the first year, and I even enjoyed, but the second year, not having the people around me, those tools were really my support.
Okay, would you share some of those with us?
Well, one of the things that we did in Grief Share were we made ornaments. We made special ornaments that were a tribute or a memorial to the persons that we lost. And we had fun while we were making the ornaments. We told stories and shared about the people while we were making those ornaments. And then we, in our family, we hung them on the tree, and then we were able to take pictures of them. And when we had our Zoom call, we shared the ornaments with the people. And that started a tradition in my extended family.
Okay, great.
So that last year, other people had done ornaments and put them on their trees. So that was one of the special things that I think that we'll continue to do also.
Okay. Nelda, as the old saying goes, when it rains, it pours. So I understand that earlier this year, your mother-in-law, Daniel's mother, passed away. And although you all made some changes last year, how do you anticipate another tremendous loss in your family affecting the holidays this year?
Because we have, quote unquote, some experience so close together, and have some people around us that have been, that walk with us and stand with us when there's a loss. And those people, we've gotten close enough to be able to let them know when we're not doing well, let them know when they can tell when we're pretending. This year, though, we want to try to do something totally new. We're renting a cabin and going away. We're totally breaking the pattern of our moms.
Okay.
We're renting a cabin for about 15 people, and we will go and do that for the holiday. That's how we will attempt to spend this holiday, and take those traditions with us for both my mom and for Mother Mary, as I called her, who was my mother in love.
Okay, and I want to encourage you and others to know that it's okay to feel like being around someone one day and the next day you may want to be alone. Try to be aware of how you're feeling emotionally at any given moment, because your emotions can change,
Yes.
especially when you're grieving through the holidays. And don't feel guilty about having fun. You know, sometimes when we've lost someone close, we feel like we can't have fun. And you may not have fun each day of the holiday, but it's okay to enjoy the holidays. It's okay to be away from home. And I encourage you not to take, when you take your trip this year, don't take the guilt trip. Okay? Now, this next question I have for you, Reverend Quick, but Kimberly and Nelda, you can chime in at the end as well. But I want to talk about the importance of a passage of scripture that comes to mind. There's a passage of scripture in the Gospel of Matthew that reads, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." How would you unpack this verse as it relates to accepting or rejecting invitations during the holidays?
Yeah, I think for me it was difficult for me to say yes or say no. Most of my yeses, when it came to invitations to do things, it was a reluctant yes, and I knew inside my heart was saying no. Some pressure to be there, and as a father and a husband, a lot of those times when we gather, you don't want, especially when you're going to in-laws, you don't say, well, where's Martin? And so, just out of just trying to be there when I'm not really there. And so what I learned was, at this particular time, we'd gone somewhere, and I really didn't want to go, but I didn't want to disappoint my wife. We went out somewhere, and it was absolutely horrible. I mean, I just ruined it for her, and I don't think she kind of understood what was going on. And sometimes as a male, we have that thing, that ego, pride thing, and really want to say, because it had been a while in a lot of people's eyes, but it kept feeling like it was the same day, kind of like 51st dates. Every time I wake up, that's the first thing on.
Yeah, they're triggers, and especially during the holidays.
Absolutely, and I didn't want to have fun, and so I learned that saying no is okay, and I learned that, hey, if I got there, I should have said, hey, you know what, I'll feel better at home. I'm not there, and so that's one thing I encourage people to do: be able to articulate how you really feel, because nobody really knows how you really feel. Don't be afraid to tell people, no, I don't want to go. And don't be afraid to say yes to some things and then say, I thought I wanted to go. Nah, I changed my mind. Because when you talk about grief, there's a waffling that you're going back and forth emotionally. And any little thing can trigger your grief and just make it it can paralyze you to the point where you just can't think like you were thinking before. And it's like you just get really confused, and it just makes it worse when you have to deal with grief and anxiety of trying to say yes and trying to say no. So my thing is, if you feel yes, then it becomes a no, just tell people, say, hey, I was feeling it, but now I'm not feeling it, and so I'm ready I want to go. And I would, if I had to do it all over again, I would have driven. You could have had fun, and I could have went home and cried my eyes out. But, but I mean, and she didn't understand because I didn't tell her.
Right,
She-
right.
I didn't. I'm Martin. I'm this gregarious big man. But I was, oh my God, I was hurting so bad, and I was pretty much paralyzed by that pain.
Kim?
So for me, whenever Martin had his first major loss, and I say Martin, we all lost the family member, but for Martin it was much more traumatic because it was a brother to him. And it took a while for me to understand grief because I really had not lost anyone that tragically. So I didn't understand exactly what he was going through. My heart broke for him, my heart broke for my entire family, but my expectations were, okay, a month is up, it's time to get up, it's over. But for him, he was still grieving, and he would put on the happy face. And so it would be, Martin, come on, let's go. And it was a football game, an NFL football game that we had traveled to Jacksonville, Florida to attend. And I'm like, surely this will be the thing that will bring him out of the funk. And we got there, we were having a great time. We took a bus trip. We couldn't get in the car and leave, but his balloon was full, he was happy, everything was great. And what I didn't understand then, but I understand very clearly now, is when that wave of grief comes and hits you, you go underwater immediately. So that full balloon that I saw on the way to Jacksonville, Florida, a needle came and popped it, and immediately it had deflated. So to see him go from joy to absolute sorrow in a matter of minutes, it hurt me, but I couldn't understand I didn't know how to properly inflate him back. So for me,
Right.
It became, I'm upset now because we've come all the way here and he's over in the corner. I didn't know it was grief. I didn't know what had happened. I just saw that he went from joy to pain immediately, and now our trip was ruined. So I think the biggest thing for us is communication and talking through. He didn't know what he was experiencing, and I didn't know what he was experiencing. So I see how families can butt heads, not understanding grief. And then once I lost my father and I started experiencing those feelings, then it became more clear. So that's why Grief Share is so helpful, because we're talking amongst peers that have been there, done that, and seen the impact of grief and how it comes in waves and it hits so hard. So for us, the yes be yes and the no be no is having that conversation beforehand. When my father passed away, my family immediately gathered, and they came and they cooked out, and they had a great time reminiscing about him, and everyone called me. I'm like, come over, where are you? And I couldn't go. And there was no way in the world I was leaving my house, because I couldn't understand how everyone could celebrate the day my father died. Why in the world was anybody in this world laughing? Why was anyone in this world smiling? Why was there a smile on anyone's face in the day of the death of the most important person in my life? So I was not feeling going to a cookout in his celebration. I regret it today, but my no was a no. And for me, I needed to stay home, and I needed to get myself together. And after that, I was able to come around family and celebrate, for the funeral, prepare for the funeral. But each person has their own way of grieving, their
Absolutely.
own way of understanding how they need to deal with loss, and being able to verbalize that and talk to people and tell them how they're feeling. I think that's really helpful, and especially during holidays, letting them know, yes, I can come to the holiday meal, or if you don't feel like cooking this year, maybe we're going to have to go to dinner. And sometimes that helps, just being able to talk and let your yes be yeses and your no's be no's.
Absolutely. Communications, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's difficult to communicate to other people when you're grieving, because sometimes you think no one will understand, but the communications piece is pivotal. I experienced that with my daughter after the loss of my beloved son some years ago, we sort of played roles from the standpoint when she came home, she was in college. She wanted to be okay for me, and I wanted to be okay for her, but neither one of us were okay. But we didn't communicate that to each other, so we pretended that we were okay, and when our balloon burst, we would go our separate ways because we didn't want the other person to know just how full we were. But both of us have learned from that, and we have been able to help other people in our families and other people to be open with that communication, because that piece is so very important. And when you talked about, even when you accept the invitation, I want to reiterate what you said, that it's okay if you accept it in the beginning and something changes and you say no. And it's okay if you said no in the beginning, because when you're grieving and accept an invitation, the meaning of what we're talking about is not the meaning of that passage of Scripture. Because Matthew was reminding us not to be wishy-washy on our faith. But that's not what we're talking about here. Because of the emotions that come with grief, we can change our minds and not feel guilty about it. I want you to talk just for a minute, one of you, either one of you, about, well, two things. About when, and I know this is involving communication, but have you experienced where one of you wanted to do something for the holidays, wanted to say yes or no to the invitation, and your spouse felt just the opposite? If that happened for you, how did you really handle that?
Well, this was, now my great-grandfather raised me. I was grieving over him when we first got married. That was difficult too. And and I was really young at that point, and I didn't know anything about grief, and so I didn't want to do anything. And so a couple of holidays passed, like 2 years, and then you get that pressure, like, where's Martin? Are y'all still married? I'd hear these comments, and I'm like, I just don't feel like, getting up, just in the grief process. And so my wife even kind of guilted me one day. She said, look, you got to get up. You got these kids. They need their father. And I was like, that pressure made me, again, only sink deeper. So now I'm pretending, to be better for them. And that's one of the things I learned in Grief Share, when I hear people say, well, I got to be strong for the rest of my family. I asked one person, I said, well, how's your family doing? They didn't know, because back to the communication, they could be doing better than you. But because you assume I got to be strong, and that strength was me putting up that front when I should have just said, well, Kim, this is what's going on. This is really difficult for me. And I've had a lot of losses, but these are very close people, and I really don't know how to navigate through it. And so that's important to just to communicate and be okay with no or yes, however you feel, and not waffle in that.
Absolutely. And it's also important for us to know that grieving, expressing your grief, is not a sign of weakness. Now, this next question is for all of you. So often in our lives, we hear people say, pray about it. But that comment has to be put into action. You have to pray. Pray is a very important component of grief. So I want you all to share with me briefly, how can we use prayer during the holidays to help thrive through the holidays? How can we use prayer?
One thing my family has done for many years during Thanksgiving is anytime we gather, we normally have 30 to 40 people that may come to the house and enjoy a meal. But before we break bread, the first thing we do is we light a candle. and we go around the room and we call out the names of our ancestors or those who are no longer at the table, and we remember them and we acknowledge them and we lift them up in prayer. And for us, that has always been a very important, cherished tradition that we have done, because it just brings them to the room. And it helps us remember how the special times that we had with them in the years past, as well as it teaches the younger ones who they are. We also whisper, prayers amongst ourselves, and we pray for each other. That's with everyone in the room. So I think prayer is really important, and acknowledging your ancestors during the holiday times is helpful to remember them.
Thank you for that. Nelda, I think you were about to say something as well.
Yes, I was going to say that one tradition that we have is praying the favorite scripture of persons who've gone on. Everyone has a scripture in our family that when you hear that scripture, you say, oh, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. And we're intentional about praying those scriptures during our family gathering time during the holidays. We also will make toast to the person, and that's usually after dinner. We'll say, and your toast can be with water or grape juice. It doesn't have to be with alcohol, but it's a time of celebrating the person, and one or two people saying something poignant or funny or whatever, just in memory of the person. And you'd be surprised how it brings laughter and joy.
And it's okay
around
to
that
laugh
time.
while you're
Exactly.
grieving.
Exactly.
Thank you. And I'm glad to hear you mention toasting. Although this doesn't have anything directly to do with prayer, but what it brought back to my mind is to encourage our listeners and to encourage each other. Don't use food, shopping, or alcohol to an obsessive way in order to numb the pain of your grief.
Right.
Is there anything you'd like to add about prayer?
I especially, I've learned that to lament, and that merely means to talk to God about where you are. God, this is difficult. Lord, would you help me deal with the other person that's grieving? It don't necessarily have to be about you. Lord, help our family do these difficult times in this season. And that really begins to focus more on God than yourself, because God is there to walk with you. And hopefully, prayerfully, through that lament, that will also help your family as well. At least it will, if nothing else for yourself, maybe it encourages you to be present, fully present with family. And I think that it's okay to even like Nelda said, we've laughed, and the laugh turned into a cry. But that's okay. I mean, you laugh.
Absolutely.
But it's okay.
It's okay.
That's where you are.
Right. And I want to also mention that while we were not able to do it last year in person, and maybe some churches still will not be able to do it this year, but try to reach out to your congregation, participate in the holiday rituals of your church or your other faith traditions. It can be a tremendous help to reach out and receive what your congregation have to offer. Now, this last question is for all three of you as well. The children and the teenagers are too often forgotten during the holidays when it comes to grieving and even just grieving in general. But I want you to share with us, how can we assist our children and our teens to also thrive through the holidays? We don't want to push them aside as if not that they don't matter, but that they're just there to be a part of whatever decisions we come up with. What ideas did you have for our teens and our children?
I think that's a great question because, we've dealt with grief at different stages of our children's lives. So we really didn't realize at times that some of the decisions that we were making were impacting the children. And so if we decided not to attend the Christmas party, then the kids weren't getting the Christmas gifts. If we decided not to have Thanksgiving dinner, then the children wouldn't see their cousins and be able to partake in all of the great food. And my daughter had to stop me one year because I said, I don't think I'm doing Thanksgiving this year. And she was the one that said, but Mom, we have to do Thanksgiving. And I didn't even think about the children at the time. So realizing that it's not just the adults that are grieving, and understanding that children may grieve differently. They may not be crying all day, they may not be sad, but they're trying to be strong for the parents. So recognizing that and talking to them as well, and seeing if there's special things that you can do during the holidays to make sure that the children, if they want to do something to acknowledge the loved one that they lost, they can. Making the ornaments is a wonderful idea, but just remembering them in the decision-making process and make sure they're included with that is always helpful.
Okay.
I think it's helpful to be intentional about including them in conversations about the persons who's been lost, and not try to quote unquote protect them by not mentioning the persons. Also earlier in the month before my mom passed away, my husband's nephew committed suicide, and that was so devastating for us. And for the young, of course, he was the gregarious person that all of the youngsters that spent time with the young people. And we allowed them to go with us to the memorial. And we celebrate his birthday now. And we will include talk about him at Christmas. That's something very new for our family. We didn't do that before what I say, I keep talking about Grief Share because it's been so important for me. I hope it's helped other people too, but I know God sent that ministry for me, But we allow them to just know that that person is still a part of life. Is still living, just not in
just
a way
not
that we can
physically
see.
there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Thank both of you, but it is so important to include the children and the teens and recognize that their way of grieving is not always our way of grieving. And I'm so glad you brought up the suicide from the standpoint that too often in our families, we think that we are not supposed to talk about suicide. And prayerfully, those who are listening to you all as you share your stories will pick up on that among the other things that have been shared today, that person was an integral part of the family's life, and it's okay to talk about it. There's so many myths, unfortunately, even in the church about suicide, and it's just that, myth. So thank you for sharing that, and kudos to your family for doing that.
And I was a chaplain at Palmetto Richland. They had a session, grief session specifically for teenagers, and our kids went. And I think you kind of threatened them to go, but
They weren't willing.
and it was just kids, not parents. So we had to kind of drop them off. But when they came back, they had them write letters to the people that were deceased, and we didn't realize how they felt and it was different emotions, some
Because
anger,
the
some
adults
questions.
weren't listening.
Right, we weren't listening. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's just like in a room when somebody passed away, we always hug each other, and the kids are down here looking like, you know. But it gave us an insight, like they need to express that.
Absolutely.
And I know one time I think my son saw me crying, and I went back to him. I said, you know why I was crying? And I let him know how I was hurting. I said, well, how are you feeling? And I never thought he was at my mother's house when he had just saw Daryl right before he got killed. And it just never entered my mind, like, my God, what is he going through?
And that way of processing is something that the adults can be reminded of too, that you can always write down your thoughts. Journal it, the thoughts are just for you. You don't have to share them with anybody else. You're sharing it with God. God knows your mind and your heart. But write it down. Writing your thoughts down can be tremendous. Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of Tuesday Table Talk at Journey United Methodist Church. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Tuesday Table Talk, where thriving through the holidays have been our theme. Our sponsor is Journey United Methodist Church, Columbia, South Carolina. The Reverend Dr. George A. Ashford is the senior pastor. This is your host, Reverend Mary L. Johnson, praying your blessings and safety as you thrive through the holidays.